You'll
Yeah.
be working very hard. I know that.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. It's gonna be. This could go late Tuesday night.
Well, you
It
know
could
what?
go
I was
late.
thinking some today. We have a live broadcast. Can you imagine if there's a recount? I did the recount. This is how old I am. I did the 1981 recount where Jim Florio and Tom King went into the recount. And that night, the night of the election, Joe Rodriguez, who was the public advocate, we went over. They have a place in Camden County where they count all the votes by computer. And
Hmm.
it was wild. I mean, I will never forget. I didn't get home till about, I was a new father. I didn't get home until about 7 in the morning. I'll never forget it. And then the recount lasted about a month.
Huh.
Unbelievable. All right, Doc, how do I look?
You look fine, sir.
Oh, sir. Sir's my father. You can call me Alan. Hold on one second. All right. All right. We're now. What about my cap? Am I too high, too low? Actually, it cuts off. I'll back up. How's that?
You're good, my friend.
All right. Good. All right. Very good. Okay. I'm ready to go when it's 3, 2, 1.
All right. 3, 2, 1. We're good. We are live online.
Good evening and welcome to the dynamic political centrism. Let me start again, okay?
We're good. I mean,
all right. Good evening and welcome to the voice of dynamic political centrism. I am that voice, Alan Steinberg, and we have a very special and exciting show tonight. It's a preview of election the year 2025, and with us is the outstanding journalist, Brent Johnson. You know, every year, I should say every 4 years, when you have a gubernatorial election, you have some correspondent, some journalist, some opinion writer who really, in my view, gets the award for Journalist of the Year. And this year, it would have to go, the Oscar for that would have to go to Brent Johnson. He is a person who is unanimously respected because I got to tell you, I heard more grousing and complaining this year about journalists than I ever heard from both camps. But when it came to Brent Johnson, all I heard was universal acclaim. So, Brent, it is our honor to have you on our show. And even when you become some big Washington journalist someday, we hope you will appear on our show.
Of course, I like Jersey way too much. This is the perfect political state. Where else would you want to go?
You know, that's the truth. I was talking to someone today, and I was commenting negatively on the Cheryl campaign. I said they had access to the finest journalists, the finest consultants, the most insightful policy experts right here in New Jersey. Why did they go to Washington, D.C. to have them run the campaign? I think that win or lose, that was one of the stupidest things they could have done.
One thing I was thinking about actually this week is that no matter who wins, and I think governors have learned this early on in their tenure. We're the ones that they're going to be dealing with, meaning we're the ones that are going to be covering them every day. And then there's always the allure of talking to DC media and having New York media look at you, and they'll look at you every now and then, especially in election seasons. But the Jersey Press Corps, us, Politico, NJ Monitor, North Jersey 1015, NJPBS, we're the ones who are on the ground and covering this.
That's absolutely true. And we have had some of the most impactful campaigns regarding issues, regarding a future look at national politics. You can come right here to New Jersey. And New Jersey, as Michael Aaron used to say, never lets you down because there is a big election. I'm a political junkie and I love living and covering journalistic events, political events. I love living in this state. And the reason I do is every year there's a big election. This year is my favorite election, the gubernatorial, and I'll tell you why that is. The presidential election, our access is pretty much limited to what is going on in New Jersey among all the 50 states plus the District of Columbia. But in terms of the New Jersey gubernatorial, we are the full ball game. We have access to everybody. I'll never forget it's about 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I began my tenure in the Bush administration. I was first term, I was a regional advocate of SBA, but the second term I got my dream job. And that dream job was regional administrator of Region 2 EPA. And in that job, I had national coverage because of all the Superfund issues. And when I would see myself on TV, I would get a big kick out of it. I have to admit, it
Oh, yeah.
was something for the ego. But everything, we had access to everything because of what our location was, because our location was in New Jersey, one of the most seriously impacted states environmentally speaking. But I used to deal a lot with Washington media because I used to go down and meet with our congressional delegation once a month. And it was no big deal. I mean, it was exciting to be in Washington. It was exciting to go to the White House. I had a lot of affection for President Bush personally, but we knew every trick in the book, so to speak, in terms of policy, in terms of what goes on right in New Jersey. And I love being in this state. I love the presidential year. The next year is the gubernatorial. The year after that is either Senate, U.S. Senate, or U.S. House of Representatives, or both. And then the final year is the legislative year. And our legislative elections are exciting. So, Brent, I hope there's enough exciting going on here to keep you with us for many years to come.
Oh yes, I have absolutely. I plan on staying in New Jersey, and anytime you want me on the podcast, I'm always happy to. I'd also like to note that we said goodbye to the baseball season last night with a very good World Series, and I always wear my Mets shirt on your
look
show.
What I got on it. Look what you got on.
Right. We always share our love for the New York Mets, and I'm already missing baseball. I can't. It's 100 days to pitchers and catchers. It can't come soon enough.
Well, you know what? I have a season package. I get 20 games.
Yep.
You're going to have to share one or two of those games with me
We
because
also, I should note the World Baseball Classic returns this year in March, which will also be very exciting.
That is true.
That turned out to be a fantastic investment in baseball.
is it in Puerto Rico again?
I don't know. Yeah.
Give me 5 seconds and I'll get the information for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you always get the right information, but I attended a World Baseball Classic when I was at EPA. I used to go down to Puerto Rico about 5 times a year because they were in Region 2. And it was exciting. It was exciting for me personally because the joy of my youth was watching Roberto Walker Clemente play right field for the Buccaneers, the Pittsburgh Pirates. And he was absolutely revered in Puerto Rico, like no player was anywhere. Last night, I got mad at something too. They were talking about the players that had the greatest World Series, and they left Clemente off the list. He had the greatest World Series of any player in history. He went 14 for 14 in terms of getting a hit every single game. And the World Series of 1971, he won on his back with the double, the triple, and the home run in Game 6. Although they lost that game, next day he went out and won the World Series with that big home run in the 4th inning. So the fact that Clemente was left
Steve Blass on the mound, and that was a good.
Steve Blass, number 28.
Yep.
When he jumped up and down after winning game. I'll tell you, we have to have 2 shows a week, one for politics and the other for sports. And we got to get Yoni to wear one of our. I think he's a Phillies fan, but I still love and respect him. So he's allowed.
I mean, you have to choose here. I could take the Yankees fan from my wife, or go with Phillies. Either way, I think I'm going to get stoned by both of you.
Oh, that's fine.
Well, no. We need you to.
The Mets have no room to argue. The Mets have no room to argue this year. So
no, but they're just a love, and their stadium looks like old Ebbets Field. It's a joy.
Yes.
But anyway, right now I'm going
to answer the question, Alan.
Sorry.
I had the information. Pool A for the World Baseball Classic will be in San Juan. Pool B will be
in San Juan. Okay, good.
Pool B is in Houston. Pool C is in Tokyo. Pool D is in Miami. So they are all spread out for the
spectrum,
Oh, we can go anywhere in the world. Well, you can buy the tickets and attend with Brett and myself. No, I wouldn't. I put you to a lot of hard work, but not that.
So then I choose Pool D because that's where Israel's based out of, in Miami.
Oh, I can root for that. Gary Taffet is a good friend of mine. He was Jim McGreevy's chief of staff, and he had a special night called Baseball Jewish Alumni, and I went to that. And the baseball pitcher who had the greatest record of any Jewish pitcher is someone that people would not think of right off the bat. They would start off with Koufax, but he had a limited career because of his arthritic arm. The all-time greatest Jewish pitcher in terms of wins and losses was none other than Ken Holtzman of the Chicago Cubs.
Huh, I didn't know that. He that's interesting. I mean, Ken Holtzman was a very fine pitcher, the Cubs and Athletics, but I didn't know that. Yeah, you would assume Koufax, but he only pitched a limited time. Yeah,
he only pitched a limited time. He had his first great year in 1961. He was on the way to another great year in 62, but he had a finger that had something called Raynaud's syndrome. And then 63, 64, 65, 66, he was one of the greatest pitchers who ever stepped on the mound. But
Yeah.
now let's go back to New Jersey, where we don't have a team, but we have politics that is just as exciting. And I'm going to make my prediction. Understand this. I'm a good analyst. I am often wrong with my predictions. I admit it, because analyzing an election, analyzing a public issue is one thing. But a lot of times the correctness or incorrectness of your prediction is a function of imponderables that one would never see ahead of time. I'm not saying that to give myself an excuse, but I think there's a variance between the accuracy of my analyses and the accuracy of my predictions. But I'll make my prediction now. On Tuesday, Jack Ciattarelli is going to win the election and become the next governor of the state of New Jersey. And I'm going to give you a reason that people will talk about. Those who don't listen to our show will talk about forever. I'm going to tell you what's going to do it. And I don't mean this as an ethnic prejudice. The Jewish vote is going to win the election for Jack Ciattarelli, because I was talking to the person who was running the show, so to speak, Avi Rickler today, and we were going town by town. It is amazing what a presence. Don't forget, the Jewish vote is the fourth largest vote, the fourth largest ethnic population in the state. And it's a population, people talk about what Mikey Sherrill, I don't believe she's prejudiced or anti-Semitic. She just doesn't know our community. And according to what I was told, it's going to be an article in the Jewish Link this week. She never attended a single synagogue during the whole campaign. That is political malpractice is what that is. You cannot ignore the Jewish community. And this year, the focus was on our community so much because of the Jack Ciattarelli campaign. The big factor, a huge factor, and I learned the inside of this, was what happened down in Lakewood. It wasn't just the VOD, it was the whole community. And the turnout in Lakewood and in the environs of Lakewood has been unbelievable thus far in the early mail vote, in personal vote. And that is going to be a huge factor. I'm not going to say it's going to be a landslide victory for Ciattarelli, but I think he's going to win. And I think what's going to go all over the country in states with a significant Jewish population is there will be a new focus by Republicans on the Jewish vote. And that's going to result in a lot of change. I'll say one more result that I think will come out of this campaign. And that result basically is that for all the talk, and I'm not a Trump man, as you know, I have denounced him as much as anybody, although I did give him credit on the Middle East. He is not as unpopular as one would think. I wish he was more unpopular, but he always has that base. He always has that MAGA base. And that is going to come through in this election also for Jack Ciattarelli, even though he is not a MAGA type of person. So let's go to Brett. What do you say about that?
Two thoughts on that. One, I've had a few Republicans tell me that the Lakewood vote is really not to be underestimated because it'll help offset votes in places like minority communities in Newark, Camden, and the fear among some Democrats is that the turnout in Newark is not going to be as big for Sherrill as it might have been for other candidates. And that Lakewood will help make up the difference in that respect for Jack. And then number two, you talk about Trump's popularity. Polls do show him overall in a blue state that he's in the 40s, that he's underwater. But a lot of people have noted he's not like tremendously underwater. Like he's not where Christie was at the end of his tenure. And he's similar to where Murphy is in recent polls. Murphy's been polling in the high 30s, low 40s. So Trump he's not broadly well liked in a blue state, but he's not a pariah.
100%. And all that has to happen is a victory for Ciattarelli. And I think the campaign contributions to the Democratic Party and to the various congressional, Senate and House campaign committees is going to be hurt very badly by a Ciattarelli victory. This election is of national implication. And that has not been publicized because everybody took for granted that Ciattarelli is going to win in New Jersey, that Sherrill would win in New Jersey, and that Spanberger would win in Virginia. Well, it looks like Spanberger is pretty well in the driver's seat in terms of Virginia. But right now, everyone knows that the Democrats are scared to death as to what may happen in New Jersey. Bringing in Obama, there's an interesting facet, and I have mixed views on Obama, but it doesn't affect what I will predict for him. He's not a great help in New Jersey. He came in and campaigned for John Corzine in the year 2009 in the election against Chris Christie, and he lost substantially. He also, what'd you say, Doc?
I just want to hop in. 2009 was also a rare storm because we had a three-way race that year that Corzine underestimated. I think Daggett took most of his votes came from the Corzine camp and not from the Christie camp.
True, but there was nothing at all that a popular president could not have mitigated that somehow. But Obama's popularity was always a mixed bag. He didn't win two landslides. He won by a comfortable but not landslide victory over John McCain. And the same held true against Mitt Romney. A lot of people thought Romney might win that race when it got to the end. So I think bringing in Obama is sort of a dud in terms of a political weapon. I don't think it's going to help that much. We shall see. I could be wrong. We shall see. But nevertheless, I think that right now there are a lot of frightened Democrats. They're frightened about the impact that this may have on the national midterms in the next two cycles, and they got a lot to think about. Brent, what do you think?
Yeah, I can tell you that I've heard two competing narratives about the Obama visit. From Republicans, you hear, well, that shows how scared they are that they felt they had to bring in the big gun to close it out. And then, I also hear Democrats say, well, we're just trying to run up the score. We see we're ahead in the polls, or most polls, and that we're just not taking anything for granted. And why not bring Barack Obama in? But you hear a lot of competing narratives, conflicting narratives in this campaign. You hear about Democrats being nervous, and I've had Democrats themselves privately tell me that they have been nervous about her campaign. They don't think she's a great candidate on paper, but maybe not in practice. I've also heard Democrats in recent days say her ground game has been pretty impressive in the final days, and it's helped make up for some of those things. But there's definitely not a happy streak throughout the Democratic Party in the state over how this campaign has been run. And you hear the opposite with the Republicans. Republicans are facing a numbers game. It's a question of, do enough Democrats stay home and Jack win over independents and undecideds and get the MAGA base to come out for him? And is that enough to close the gap? So, but Chitterelli, it's widely been known that his voters have more enthusiasm if you read the polls and if you go to Jack's events. The Obama event was the first event I saw from the Democrats that really had a unified front and a unified enthusiasm. The question is whether that's enough to put them over, for them to secure a win. But, there had been questions about her throughout the campaign. Some people feel a lot better now about her campaign than they did in the past. And I've also heard a lot of Democrats trying to correct the record and be like, I don't know she's been ahead in every poll. And, I don't know why everyone thinks she's having a bad campaign. I can't deny the fact, though, that I've had Democrats tell me they're nervous. I'm not making that up. I always say I have no horse in this race. I don't personally have I don't endorse a candidate. I'm not looking for one to win over the other. I'm just telling you what I'm hearing. I hear, the Democrats have been nervous until recently when they started to feel better. But polling is also tough to read. It's been relatively close and tight, but it's also been all over the place. We've had two polls in recent days that show a 1-point race, Atlas Intel and Emerson. Then you have other polls show a 7-point race where Cheryl's up 7. The average is about 4 or 5. She's up, but who knows what is going to be the correct poll? One of those two extremes is going to be wrong. She's
100%.
So it's a question of what it's going to be.
I agree with you on the polling, but I'll get to that tangentially in a second.
Yeah.
Because I hear another thing from Democrats that connects with that polling. They are worried as the dickens about basically apathy and lack of enthusiasm in two crucial Democratic communities. One is the African American community, and the other is, I hate to use the word Hispanic because there's no real common culture among all the Spanish-speaking groups.
Yeah, Latino is always what we try and use.
Latino, and then you hear those who are insulted by the word Latino.
Yes, because Hispanic technically is only ones who are connected to. It's kind of like how you hear African Americans sometimes are upset because
that's
Jamaican
right.
Is
in
black.
fact, you can use the word Latino.
Yeah,
you can use that word in a sense that a lot of people feel it's a pejorative.
But, yes, it's funny, but Hispanic, like Cuba, is not. Is it Cuba not a Hispanic country? There are countries.
No, it's a Spanish-speaking country.
Brazil, thank you. Brazil is one of them.
But the difference in the cultures, I got this out of being at EPA. The difference in the cultures between the Cuban community and the Puerto Rican community are as different as night and day. In fact, it often is a conflicting culture. So
Yes.
it's not like the African American community where there pretty much is a common culture that exists. It pretty much is there. But I think if there is apathy, if there's a lack of enthusiasm, and I was told this by a very prominent Democrat with whom I have a good relationship personally, we also talk off the record about elections all the time. He's always the voice, oh, the Dems will win this, the Dems will win that. They usually do, but not this time. He is really worried about the apathy that he senses in the African American community, I should say, in communities of color. He's really nervous about that.
Which is
So that tells me a lot.
That's one thought about why they brought Barack Obama in too, that he was the so far the only black president, and he really galvanizes that community.
That goes back to the Democratic problem. You're going back years at this point to saying that's a star we have. Like, where's the bench? Where is the firepower coming? Is it a Democratic problem that they don't have it? They have not built excitement up. They have not gone. They've rested the laurels for years.
They don't allow the emergence of new stars.
Yes, and that's one of the things you learn. Like, it tends to be every decade or so, the Democrats get a new star that they find hard to replace. Go back to the late 70s. Jimmy Carter was that person. Then Bill Clinton in the early 90s. And
100%.
You have a charming star that comes in out of nowhere. Like, the governor of Georgia, the governor of Arkansas, a senator from Illinois. And they're not the ones you see on the Sunday morning talk shows. And all of a sudden they take over the party, but then they go away and they find it hard to find someone to replace. It's very
well.
common.
I'm gonna add on to what you said, and because what you said is so true, but I have a fascinating angle on that. When I was at EPA, Hillary Clinton was the U.S. senator from the state of New York. Mm-hmm. I thought when I would go down to the EPA, because I had a reputation at that time, it's hard to believe, given all the blasts I get from Trump people about being anti-Trump. At that particular time, I figured I was going to have a terrible partisan relationship with Hillary Clinton. My relationship with her was one of the best political relationships I ever heard in my life. She knew where partisanship stopped. I worked with her on the most critical issue, 9/11 recovery, and she was fantastic. She made me promises. She would say, well, I'm not going to go out and make a political issue on this because it could throw everything off kilter. And she kept every single promise. And now she's a phenomenal opinion writer. She writes a lot of times for The Atlantic. And also at the time, because of my Jewish involvement, Yoni's Jewish involvement, I was very concerned about her for Israel. I had right to be concerned about Obama. There was an article today about how he plans to advise, Zohran Mamdani, and that scared the hell out of me when I read that. But Hillary Clinton was terrific for Israel, and I had a great relationship with her. So you never know how things are going to turn out. But she was on the verge of becoming that new star, as you would put it. Yeah. But her loss to Trump was just devastating for her political prospects in her career. So you're right. I mean, they are not coming up with new stars. Perhaps Andy Bashir would be a star. Perhaps the man I admire a lot, Josh Shapiro, could be a star. Although I'm going to tell you something. This is not to be taken literally as a negative motivation. I would be thrilled to see Josh Shapiro as the first Jewish president of the United States. However, I think there are a lot of Democrats, not out of anti-Semitism, but out of a desire, so to speak, to have a regular middle American, as they would put it, rather than someone of color, someone Jewish, someone of an ethnic group, become the next nominee. I sense that. It's not right. I'm not defending that, but I sense that that is out there. So the lack of a star is really a problem. I mean, I guess they figured they had no other stars, quote unquote, except for Obama, and they sent it in. But over to the polls for a minute. Mm-hmm. I am not an expert on polling. My favorite pollster is someone I know, Adam Geller, and he said something to me the other day. He thinks that basically that in this campaign, the Republicans led by Jack Ciattarelli are going to have a terrific campaign. He admires Jack very much, not just because he's Jack's pollster, but as he said, he has seen Jack develop as a candidate to an extent that was never foreseen years ago. He's emerged, he's ascended as a terrific candidate. But as he puts it, there are a lot of votes in the arena that may be crossover votes. In other words, Democrats that the vote by mail picks up as Democrats, Republicans picked up as Republicans. But a lot of times these voters are crossover voters. You can have in the vote by mail, you can have votes counted as Democratic votes, but when they get in that polling booth, they may vote for a Republican and vice versa. In other words, the turnout models, the amount of turnout of each party may not be duplicative of how these people actually vote.
Yeah, I get the feeling polling just in general, in so much has changed about politics in the last decade. You can tie it to the rise of Donald Trump, but you know the phenomenon of people not wanting to tell pollsters they were going to vote for Trump. Maybe there's still a bit of that too. Maybe scientific polling is just different than it used to be. So it's tough to use a poll and to gauge exactly what you're going to see. We saw it 4 years ago. The final poll showed Murphy up about, I think it was 7, 8, or 9, something like
Right.
that. And he won by 3. So that wasn't a huge polling miss, but it's still enough to make people question it. So it's hard to go by polls. And we've seen an example this past week. You had 2 opposite polls, and it's tough to know who to believe. You had Fox News, which you would think is a right-leaning poll, although not necessarily. They have a pretty respected polling operation. They showed Mikey up 7. And then you had Atlas Intel, which is one of the most accurate pollsters of the 2020 and 2024 presidential election. Nate Silver gave them an A+ last year. They have Jack down by 1, Mikey only up by 1, so statistical tie. So you tell me which one of those two. It's tough to know which one of those two is going to come out on top, or is it going to split the difference, or is it going to be Jack up by 1? It's so tough to predict these days. Politics is so unusual, and so you don't want to rely too much on polls. I try and base it on what I'm hearing on the ground, and what I'm hearing on the ground, almost anyone from either party will tell you Mikey's slightly favored, but it's really a jump ball. It's anyone's game.
100%. And what you said about polls like Atlas, you were 500% correct. I hope they are accurate. As a
Yeah.
Citarelli supporter, I hope they are accurate. And I have no reason to think that they are or are not accurate. But nevertheless, that shows the nature of polling. There's less certainty about polling than there has ever been. I will be at headquarters watching on Tuesday night, and I'll be praying.
I also know that some Democrats who are closely tied to Cheryl have been annoyed by the narrative that Democrats are nervous, and that it is a close race, and that it's not, because I think they feel, I do think there's a feeling that the Trump, it's one widely known or heard thing that I've heard from insiders, is if Trump wasn't president, that if Kamala Harris is president, Jack would win by 10 points.
I heard
Because he doesn't, yeah. And then number 2 that you hear is that Trump is tough to gauge too, because you need his base, you need the 30% who is always going to vote for Trump, and then you also can't rip into Trump, because there's some people in the middle who aren't incredibly put off by him. And then you also can't risk Trump getting annoyed at you and sending off a tweet that's gonna say like Jack Citarelli, who is he to question me. So there's those factors, and then there's also, as we mentioned, the Black and Latino vote, and the thought that maybe there's a depressed vote like there was for Kamala Harris last year. There are so many overlapping factors in this race. It is a lot to keep track of, and very difficult to explain in short strokes to people who aren't tremendously paying attention. You just see that there's a governor's race going on. This is I've covered 4 governor's races now, by far the most interesting, the tightest, and the most heated of any of the 4 that I've covered.
Our great minds run in the same direction, Brent. I feel exactly the same way. I get up, and some mornings I'm in a terrific mood. Oh, Jack's going to pull it out. And then something happens during the day that may not even be that significant. Then I start to worry. Last week, my son, who is a executive of a company dealing with internet technology, he calls me early on the phone. How you doing, Dad? And I was sort of in a gruff mood. He said, "What are you so gruff about?" I said, "This election is driving me crazy, and it gets me angry at times." He said, "Oh, Dad, I love you when you're angry like that." And I started laughing. I said, "I don't enjoy it quite as much. Maybe when I was your age, I did." I said, "But I am not enjoying this at all. I am going crazy with all these different news items going back and forth. It's just impossible to put a final gauge on it. Even what I predicted tonight, I know I can be wrong. I've been wrong before, but you're really playing. They used to say that polling was a science. No, polling is an art. It's a lot different, because with when it's a science, you can use the scientific data. You can come out with certain conclusions, and that's it. But when polling is an art, it relies a lot on empirical evidence, reliance on things that has happened in the past that have happened in the past. It's a lot more difficult polling nowadays, and I think that's why there are a lot more significant mistakes. On the whole, polling is still accurate, but there are significant mistakes that are made. And I think for that reason, it's an art, it is not a science. Now, taking from there, what do you think is going to happen in the legislative races? I'll let you go first and then I'll go.
That's an interesting thing that they haven't gotten as much attention. Just one, because there aren't as much press covering it. Number two, because there's been so much focus on the governor's race, you don't hear much about it. I do not expect the assembly to change hands. I expect Democrats to still be in control. It would take a major sea change for Republicans to get the necessary seats to flip over. But you could see some seats change hand. It really depends on who you talk to, kind of like the governor's race. Some Democrats are like, well, we could lose a few seats. And others are saying like, oh, we might even pick up a seat. No one's expecting Democrats to start stealing Republican seats away. But I don't really know how to gauge it. You also don't hear as much about these elections as you do the governor's race. The moment you turn on Jeopardy, there's 17 ads about the governor's race.
True.
You don't, I see some, I live in District 16. So I see some ads because I think I live in 14 now. Either way, I longed for a long time, lived in 16, and I get the 16 district ads. So you see a little bit of that because that's kind of a purplish district, but I haven't heard as much about those races, which is also, a commentary on how sad it is that the one house of the state legislature, the assembly, doesn't get as much coverage. Maybe,
I can't stand that. I agree.
Yeah, it really is a shame. Yeah.
It is a shame. But regarding the legislative races, I'll tell you the big major development, it actually started about 30 years ago, but it accelerates with time, is the amount of money spent on television for advertising in those races. I remember the race where it first started. It was back in 1991. Florio was very unpopular then. The Republicans ended up getting veto-proof majorities in both houses of the legislature. There was only one Democratic seat, or I should say Republican seat, that was captured by the Democrats. That seat was in Camden County. It covered the Cherry Hill area, and it was won by a friend of mine, the late John Adler. Now, in that campaign, there was some personal animus going on. George Norcross really had it in for Laskin because he had blocked the appointment of his father, I believe it was to the Racing Commission.
Yep.
So George did what George would do. I don't fault him ever for being competitive. There are other areas where I'll criticize him, but he has a right to be competitive, and he sure was. In that race, it was the first major use of network television in the history of New Jersey legislative races. They started running all sorts of anti-Laskin ads. And on election day, Laskin, who had been a big winner over the years, had always scored very well. He was a son of Camden. He was a member of the Jewish community in Camden when it was one of the most prominent Jewish communities in the country. And everyone thought, listen, Lee will survive it. Well, he didn't. He lost the election in a close but no cigar race. It was clear there was not going to be a recount. Adler won that race at the end. But I was with Roger Bodman at one time. We were walking at the Minneapolis Republican National Convention in the year 2008. And we were on the ballpark in what was then called the Humphrey Dome, the Dome Stadium where the Twins played. And I'm walking around with Roger. I said, Roger, do you realize that political history in New Jersey was made here? And the reason it was made there was right after the sixth game when Kirby Puckett hit the big home run that sent it into a seventh game. And Jack Buck said, so long, and we'll see you till tomorrow. And then the seventh game of that World Series, it's amazing how baseball and World Series and politics all merge at some point. The seventh game was one of the great games in World Series history, and it was won by the Minnesota Twins, who had a very good club, over the Atlanta Braves. And the history was that right after the end of the sixth game, right after Kirby Puckett hit that home run, the Democrats ran their first commercials. And because it was at the news time where most good commercials are run, that is like network TV and commercials covering a wide area, they usually come in right after the news. And so right after the news, you had these anti-Lee Laskin commercials, and they were seen by far more people than if the ball game had become a runaway, let's say in the fifth inning or sixth inning. That's where a baseball game can affect the whole election. And
Yeah.
sure enough, Laskin went down to defeat. My observation, and I don't know how you feel about this, Brent, is that the amount of spending has just gone sky high in these legislative races, that a challenger really has a difficult time, almost a prohibitive time.
Yeah, it's tough. It's especially they increased the limits in the election law that Murphy signed last year, or 2 years ago, and now yeah, money is it's almost like money is as dominating as it ever has been before in politics. This is going to be the most expensive governor's race we've ever had when all is
Yes,
said and done. And you can tell just from the ads. I mean, the moment you turn on your TV or log onto your computer, you're hit by a barrage of ads, anti-Jack ads, anti-Mikey ads. And it's interesting to see whether that will have an effect on the outcome or whatnot. I do know, I have heard both of the ads that got criticism that each side ran. One that she was calling him high tax Jack and was going to that he's going to install a 10% sales tax, which
right.
Chiarelli is not going to happen, and he was taken out of context. You hear that from Democrats. Well, but Jack's going to put in a 10% sales tax, and then I always try and fact check and be like, that's not exactly what happened there. And Jack has said no. And then the ad about her saying energy is going to cost an arm and a leg, which is not exactly what she said, but you hear people being like, well, she's going to drive up my energy bill, and she's saying I'm going to freeze energy rates. This was a tough election because it's so online now. Everything is so bite-sized and on social media that it's
Right.
easy to take things out of context. It's easy to have selective ads. So it's hard. Told someone the other day, it's almost as difficult as ever to cover politics because there's so many arrows thrown around the place. To fact check is very difficult, and you never know where someone's getting their information. It's not like the days when you had like the Willie Horton ad with Michael Dukakis, where
Sure.
everybody saw that. Nowadays, you might not. I mean, you have young voters who might not turn on a TV, or you might have older voters who might not sign on to Twitter. So you don't really know which ones they're seeing.
Well, let me ask you, since you have a better gauge on the impact of high technology on elections, you're one of the best journalists I've seen in that area. Is there a possibility that more advertising will take place in the form of digital ads or in the form of internet communications? Because that would reduce the cost of campaigns
Yeah,
significantly, in my
I
view.
think we're in the middle of a transition period. You have people still watch network TV, especially older voters who are a big swath of who votes. So you'll always have the Jeopardy hour where it's filled with ads, and I think you're going to start to see more digital ads. Yeah, because it's not that's what one thing that's underrated about New Jersey is that we don't have our own media market. So you have to advertise in two media markets. You have to advertise in Philadelphia
Right.
and New York, and that drives up the cost of things.
That is for certain.
Yeah.
The fact that we have to advertise in two media markets, and particularly in those races that are in sort of the border area between North and South in New Jersey,
Yeah,
you
like
got
my
to
area.
go into both markets. It's
Yeah,
expensive as the dickens. It really is. And
I live in Spotswood, and we get both. We get both market. Meaning you can watch the Philly news and you can watch the New York news. So, and you don't know who, if your neighbors are watching ABC 6 or ABC 7.
that's 100%.
Yeah,
And the uncertainty itself will result in higher expenditures on campaigns. If you
yeah,
have a county that has a representation in both of those markets, both the Philadelphia area and the New York area, the questions are made very early, and where are we going to put these advertising dollars? But if you've picked the wrong area, then you've got to rejigger everything. It
yeah,
gets really, it gets really complicated. I don't envy the campaign managers or the campaign consultants who are out there laboring and working these races. It's just
yeah.
it's unbelievable. Well, let me go on to another area connected. If Mikey Sherrill loses, for example, who would you expect to emerge on the next short list? For I know it's early, but in New Jersey, we always
Yeah.
start the next campaign the night of the first campaign's over.
Well, I'll tell you both things I've wondered. I do hear whispers that Raz Baraka would be the favorite if she loses. That I've already heard that Baraka's already has his eye, partially open for the next chance he gets. He's younger. He did very well in the primary. The
Yes, he
question is
did.
whether he's too left leaning for this kind of state. Um, but I don't think Steve Fulop would run again. I don't think Steve Sweeney would run again. I don't know if maybe Josh Gottheimer I could see coming in, and I've always heard whispers of like Troy Singleton or Vin Gopal or Raj Mukherjee, um, Teresa Ruiz. If we're looking for another female candidate, state lawmakers don't always tend to make great gubernatorial candidates. We haven't. The last one technically was Jim McGreevey, who was a state lawmaker. But we've also had people who like Christy Whitman, who were county. I mean, it was a different world, 30 years ago. But yeah, those are the names I've heard. And then on the Republican side, the question is if Jack loses, would he run a fourth time? The thought is if Trump is going to be an albatross for him 4 years from now, unless Steve Bannon somehow comes through with the way to circumvent the Constitution, he wouldn't have Trump next time. And he has name recognition. I don't know how many people we've seen run 4 campaigns for something. Even William Jennings Bryan, didn't go beyond 3.
The cross of gold.
Yeah. So, and then on the Republican, one of the problems in the post-Christie world, and which is one of the reasons why Jack has run 3 times and done well, is that there isn't a deep Republican bench. Maybe you could see Tom Kean Jr. or Jeff Van Drew.
I'll tell you who I see.
Mike Testa.
Yeah.
Testa. I've also heard he might run for Senate next year against Cory Booker, and maybe that could, Booker's going to be tough to take down.
That's not a winnable race in my view.
No. So if tested, I mean, I've heard a few names in that race. I've heard Ed Durrigan. I've heard Alex Zidane, the former TV anchor. I've heard, I've heard even Alina Habba, that maybe her whole tenure has been a stepping stone.
Maybe that's why she's trying to become seriously a U.S. attorney for that reason.
And then the thought is that she also would have access to Trump's donors and Trump's network. But Testa is the name I keep hearing for Senate next year, but maybe that's a stepping stone for him to run for governor. There's so many moving pieces here. And the fact that we do have a close race, you can kind of speculate on both sides because someone's going to have to lose.
Truer words never spoken. Of course, I'm rooting for Jack Ciattarelli, but I also think about all the possibilities if he were to lose or Cheryl were to lose. I would say this about Cheryl. At the very beginning, I developed an antagonism towards her, but at the beginning, I didn't feel that way. But I felt that she was running for the wrong office. I felt that she should have been running for U.S. Senate where she had the requisite experience. She does not have the requisite experience for governor. And that really troubled me. But I don't think, based on my conversations with people in her orbit, it was never even considered. It was always governor.
Yeah, I've heard a few things in that respect because obviously Tammy Murphy ended up running for Senate, and then Kim kind of came out of nowhere and became a political star and won. Yeah, I heard that it was basically Gottheimer and Cheryl. There was kind of a thought, well, one of you run for Senate, and one of you run for governor, and that both of them wanted to run for governor, so that wasn't a choice. I'd heard that maybe there was talk about Tammy Murphy running for House instead or something like that, and that she really wanted the Senate seat. There was a lot of intrigue going on last year around this time, but what we got was U.S. Senator Andy Kim and gubernatorial candidate Mikey Sherrill.
Well, you said it all. And I think that there's one flaw in the analysis of all the potential candidates. Being a governor is a great job. I mean, you get to dine with the high and mighty. You get to travel all over the world.
And it's the most powerful governorship in the country, according to the Constitution.
Exactly.
Appointments, you can line item veto the budget, and it's a populous state, so people tend to know the governor of New Jersey. It's a high profile position, so I get it. U.S. senators want to, maybe they see that as that's what they want to do the rest of their career, because technically, unless something goes wrong in the state, the last time we elected a Republican to the U.S. Senate was 1972. At that time, the Mets won the World Series championship. So, it was a much different world. Yeah, Clifford Case. And the thought is if Andy Kim wants to be in the Senate for the next 30 years, he can, because who's going to beat him?
Well, he might want that.
Yeah.
Of all the names mentioned, he's the most likely to opt for that. The problem is that both parties have this fault. They consider a Senate position as one that is highly newsworthy, exciting, get to vote on key issues. But it also takes a lot of work, but it takes much more work as a governor. If you're going to be the governor, you're going to work day and night, and you're going to have a lot of messy decisions to make because you always have to be the arbiter in disputes between the various interest groups, between the branches of each political party. It is a great job. It's the most powerful governorship in the country, but it is a messy job. And because it is a messy job, it loses its appeal very, very quickly. Now, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Also, why some people don't get reelected.
We know that.
Yeah, I mean, Jim Florio, John Corzine. There have been people who get this job and then lose it 4 years later. So it's not out of the realm. Phil Murphy almost lost it 4 years ago.
I will never understand how that happened, but he almost did.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a very high profile thing that comes with a lot of perks, but a lot of risks.
There are a lot of risks, and we will see on Tuesday night who the successful risk taker is and was. We're going to know that very soon. And I'll tell you, I can't wait. Well, on the other hand, I can wait because of all the tension.
Yeah.
But, this has been a tense race
Yes.
all the way through. And I don't I hold one thing against Cheryl. I think she really polluted the politics by saying things about Jack Ciattarelli, that he was a mass murderer. I mean, those things were uncalled for. They really were uncalled for. And people can disagree on that. But I was hoping, as long as these were the two candidates, that we would have a more high level campaign. I think Jack tried to make it that way, but things got out of hand. And I hope things never get out of hand in the future, that candidates will stick to issues and not focus on the ad hominem. And I think that hurt Cheryl, by the way.
I will say this: this race got more personal and more heated, for lack of a better term, than I ever thought it would. I did not think it would get this pointed, this race, but it did. This was a hot one.
It was a hot one. Well, we have a hot one here with us tonight in Brent Johnson. Brent, I thank you as always for coming on the show. We'll get you right after the election also, if you're available.
No problem. Would be happy to come back on.
Because your analysis is so prescient. It is so piercing. It is so insightful that I end up doing less talking than I should. And for me, I'm known to be voluble, put it that way.
Always happy to come on. You guys do a very robust discussion on politics.
Well, thank you so much. That's it for the voice of dynamic political centrism for this evening. It's going to be an exciting week, folks. We will be announcing our election night broadcast. It will be live, and Yoni, you'll be sending out to our list, I suppose, in the very near future, the link where everyone can come on, and we'll try to have some other announcements about that. But that's going to be a first for this podcast, and we're looking forward to it. And even Brent Johnson, who will be at New Jersey Advance, compiling the numbers, crunching the numbers. Maybe he will even get a chance to tune in for about 5 minutes and see how we're doing, and give us the critical review.
Absolutely. You guys do a good job. So thanks.
Thank you, my friend. That's it for this broadcast, and stay with us for the rest of the week, the remainder of the year, because New Jersey never disappoints. That's it for this broadcast. Goodbye and good luck to you and all of your families, and to both political parties for a more robust, yet more insightful